of a child who may cause harm, how do we defend ourselves from that liability? Kind of a catch-22 situation.
It is a catch-22. Representative Ward ran a bill last year kind of trying to precipitate some litigation that might solve that. We haven't gotten there yet. So it's kind of put a requirement that we remove certain types of students, but there's nowhere to remove them to. So we're still not sure what that's going to mean for us, ultimately.
I would just like to speak to that a little bit too. I appreciate Dr. Day's presentation. We've been reviewing budget numbers, and believe it or not, Krynot School District commits $10 million above and beyond special education funding that we receive from both federal and state allocations. So we're using general fund monies to help support these incredible needs. And so when we hear these conversations surrounding budget cuts and some of these other challenges, these are the types of supports we need additional help and resources for. And it's not just a protection for our general ed or traditional ed student, it's to provide inclusivity and other activities that allow these kids to participate and be in a general ed classroom and the supports necessary to sustain them in a traditional environment, which we know the data shows us is a benefit to them and a benefit to our general ed students. So
absolutely,
we probably allocate more dollars per capita and per student above and beyond in probably the entire state, and it's not enough. That's what's, I think, a little bit, I think we're all sensing that frustration in our tone of voice because those needs continue to grow even more dire. So it's great to be in so many of our schools and seeing our special education teachers in their classroom spaces and to see some of those challenges firsthand. And we went around to some of our schools when we were experiencing some challenges, and I've been back around to tour some of those places and followed up with some of those teachers, some of the things, and we're working through some of those challenges, and we've been successful on some of those issues, but some of those issues continue to linger, and we just continue to monitor those as best as we can and make sure that we're adhering to federal law, but at the same time providing the protection necessary for all of our students. So it is a source of frustration.
It is, and I've got to hand it to our teachers who are working so hard day in and day out to provide services for their kids. And it's emotional for them, it's personal for them, and they view them as their own kids. And it's hard when we have to take action against a student or remove a student when we've worked so hard to support them, but sometimes that's what's necessary. And what's even harder is when we have a student that we love and we know needs to be here, but is also harming others. And that puts a teacher in a really hard spot. But our teachers, they fare it well, and they take it on the nose, and they come back day after day. And they're some of the strongest people I know.
Kind of along those lines, I don't know if you can speak to it, Dr. Day, or if Todd could, but I had no idea when I've heard that we need to have special ed fully funded. We need to have special ed fully funded. I didn't know that from the federal government, we're supposed to get a certain percentage, and we're not getting that.
Let me talk about that. So way back in 1975, when they passed the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, Congress committed to funding what it costs to provide special education at 40%, and the states were going to then carry 60% of that. Right now, the federal government only funds it at 13%. And so right now that equates to about $13 million is what I get from kind of federal flow through. The state gives me about $36 million on top of that. So we're spending well over that. Now, when you compare that to other states, and this is where we get into some kind of pitfalls. When we're compared to Massachusetts or California, where their weighted pupil unit is closer to $20,000 and ours is $4,200, the services that they can provide with that same flow through is very different than what I can provide. And when they come here, they expect that same level of service, which puts people like Kelly in a hard spot trying to provide the Cadillac of all services when we simply don't have pools with dolphins and, you know, recreational therapists and things like that.
So the 36 million that we get from the state, are they just compensating for that lack of the 40% that they're picking up, or is that just what's expected already? Is that statutorily what we should be getting from the state anyway? Or is there anything that says?
There's a formula it really goes through. I mean, or Senator Reedy would be better to speak to this, and maybe the superintendent, but typically what happens is they fund us based on the WPU, and then we have the special ed add-on and the self-contained count, which typically up until now has carried the weight of 2 WPUs, and now it's kind of dropping.
But that's what what you were indicating.
And
So
it's based on our average daily membership.
I mean, this is what I'm hearing, going back to your thing, that we should be getting funded at a lot more per these students. And for your question, Kim, if we had that funding, we might be able to provide services that would help to mitigate some of the problems that we're seeing. Mm-hmm. But because we're not being fully funded by, number one, the federal government per the 1975,
IDEA, yeah.
and this is also being dropped apparently through the state, we are receiving less and less funding, and so we're having a hard time picking that up. Is that
That's a fair, yeah, that's a fair
okay
assessment.
Okay.
There's some question that we're trying to establish how the data is being reported to the state to see if there's some challenges you can see there and data that we're sharing in terms of our needs and numbers as well, and if it's contributing to that figure as well.
Yeah, so part of the problem we have is when a special education file is a physical file. So when a student moves into Granite School District, parents are not always upfront and forward saying my student receives special education and has an IEP. And so when they move into Granite, if they provide us with an IEP, then we know about that. Then we rely on our teachers to enter that into our system so that Focus will pick up and track that they are a student with a disability. I've got multiple different systems for doing that, including we have technical compliance managers who are ESPs who go from school to school looking at our files. If we don't have a physical file or it takes another district, another LEA or charter a while to get us that, we're not actually capturing that student is a student with a disability, and we're not able to count them until we have that physical file. So for example, we were about 1,000 students short in our December 1 count this year over last year, but in February we added nearly 1,000 students to our SCRAM count with start dates of August. So those students existed, we were servicing them, they weren't counted because somewhere along the way, either the file was late getting there, a teacher didn't put the IEP into our system so we could count them. So we've got some things like that we're trying to figure out how best to simplify the system, because it's hard. I mean, taking time out of a day for a teacher to pull an IEP and enter it into the computer when they're trying to teach is just unreasonable. We have no other way of doing it.
I just want to say that, we have, in the next few weeks, we have a JLC meeting where we're going to set our priorities. And I really feel like special education funding could be one of those. And every year we've kind of had that on there as something that we really support. But I hope that we'll be able to make that a priority this year.
Can we ask about how we committed last year to some one-time money to support co-taught kindergarten? Mm-hmm. Can we ask how that's going? Do we have any data on that?
We do have data, and it's our co-taught kindergarten classes are outpacing the previous year. So when we look at actually how they perform when it comes to our beginning of year and mid-year DIBELS or Acadians, they've made more progress than we could have imagined. It is a significant commitment, but they're doing a lot better. We had more requests this year than we had last year for co-taught kindergarten. We weren't able to fulfill those because we, again, are limited in our numbers. Ultimately, a lot of our students, the general education students who are in those classes, are also outpacing their peers in general education as well. But keeping in mind that there are up to 20 kids in those classes, not 30. You have 2 certified teachers and then 2 aides as well. So there's a lot of adult support.
And do most of the aides get funded through SPED money? Okay, so do all of them in that classroom?
Yes, both
of
the
them?
general education teacher and the special education teacher I'm paying for, as well as the paraeducators in those classes.
Okay. I think at some point, as we get to end of year testing, we'd like to see, as a board, we'd like to see some data on that, just how that is compared to our general ed classrooms for the testing, as well as, how, even anecdotally, some of the data that we have, that just so we have an idea of what we are investing in and how that's going.
Absolutely, and I can come back in June and report on that. We've got several different indicators that we're looking at monthly.
Okay.
As part of that, not just, scores are scores, and it's good to look at data, but I would like, probably anecdotally, behavior-wise, because that was a huge concern that came in, is, oh my goodness, with co-taught models, how is this going to work? How are they going to gel? Are the behaviors going to disrupt learning? So I would kind of like to know at least a little piece of that. I don't know how you would frame that or organize it. It could be anecdotal, but maybe just get some feedback from some of those co-taught teachers on,
Absolutely. We could do
how
that.
difficult behavior challenges have been. Maybe they haven't been. But that's something that I would like to know.
Oh, I think we can survey the teachers as well, yeah.
I think I'd invite you to, and Bryce can help set this up, to go visit some of these classroom spaces. I think we have had some struggles, and we've tried to provide some additional supports and work through some specific issues at some locations, but in other places it's working really well, and you would be hard-pressed to be able to identify who the special education kids are in those classroom spaces. I've sat in those classrooms, sat on the floor with the kids, and it's quite remarkable how well that's going in some places. And there's been some other challenges, and that's why we're working through those things to learn and understand how we can better support this and make it as effective as possible.
Absolutely.
Any further questions? Thank you so much, Dr. Day.
Thank you.
Being here. Okay, we're going to move on in our agenda. We have a need of an executive session for both litigation and negotiations, and I will entertain a motion as such.
We'll move on to executive session for litigation and negotiations.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to move into executive session for the purpose of litigation and negotiations. This is a roll call vote. Please state your name and your vote. Connie, I'll start with you.
Connie Burgess, yes.
Kim Chandler, yes.
Julie Jackson, yes.
Chris Wynn, yes. Karen Winder, yes.
Clark Nelson, yes.
Nicole McDermott, yes. All right.